is there a process? What is shadow work like from a nuts and bolts perspective? Like, how do you approach it? Is that a question that can be answered?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so for you. So from a nuts and bolts perspective, we kind of start with this high level model that you're familiar with, right? So shadow work came together with a combination of things. Number one was this idea of the human shadow. I told you about a little book on the human shadow by Robert Bly, which was the idea of the shadow. And then this idea of 4 archetypes that came from the book by Robert Moore and Doug Gillette called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And I know you're familiar with that. And so that was sort of a model that Cliff Barry, who created shadow work along with Mary Ellen Whalen back in the 90s, towards a little after the Mankind Project got off the ground. Cliff was involved in the Mankind Project and the New Warrior Training Adventure, and then kind of went off and created shadow work separate from the Mankind Project. And so with the idea of that we all have these archetypal energies in us, right? The energy of the king or sovereign, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. And so he broke it down into like, what are the qualities of each of those that we all have? And to begin to look at which of those might be inflated, which ones might be deflated. As I put things into the shadow bag as I go through life, some of those get inflated and some get deflated. And then there was work done by a couple called Hal and Sidra Stone around voice dialogue. And it was about how to talk to people in a way that was therapeutic and how to work with people. Yeah. Hal and Sidra Stone.
Yeah.
And how to work with people and to talk and to work with them before some traumatic event and to shift the energy around a traumatic event. And so with this model of the 4 archetypes and this voice dialogue language, and there was another guy whose name I've forgotten who also did something similar. He was an Australian guy. They created a series of scripts, and they basically said, there's woundings in these 4 archetypes. The wounding in the sovereign is I'm not enough. So if I have this shaming message that I carry that I'm not enough, we hold that in the king or the sovereign. And I say sovereign because I work with men and women. It's not just men's work.
Yeah.
So, but the other energies are really applicable to both men and women: lover, warrior, and magician. Sovereign is that more generic. The lover energy of I don't love right. People take on a wounding message that the way that I love isn't right. The warrior wounding message is I don't exist apart from you. It's all about boundaries and balance and how do I have my sense of self. And the magician wounding message or the shaming message there is I'm bad or there's something wrong with me. But it's generally an idea of being bad. So they took he took those woundings and this idea of voice dialogue, and he created scripts that are questions, really, that help people to get clear about what's going on by bringing parts out. So in general, what we do is we ask some safety questions with people. Is there anything going on in your body right now that might keep you from doing a process with me today? In coaching, there's not so much of that because we don't do a lot of real physical stuff. But if we're in a group environment, we might check in on that. You probably heard that on the Mankind Project weekend, any safety things around physical. We ask them, is there anything about the space we're in that might keep you from being present? If we're in a group environment, we could ask, is there anybody here that might cause you to edit what you say or do? And then we would just ask people, what do you want to have happen here? Right? So what is it that you want to have happen here? And, the answer we're looking for is some kind of a positive, specific want about how they want to be, how they want to feel or show up in light of the circumstances that are in their life, right? I want to be more confident. I want to be more loving. I want to be, more disciplined in how I take care of myself. Anything around what they want to have happen for themselves to be able to have the experience they want.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big thing, is find out what they want. And then in general, once we do that, we kind of say, okay, great. So if I said to you, Philip, just be that way, you'd say to me, I would, except for what? So what's keeping you from doing that, right? And that's the beginning of exploring the shadow that's in play here, is to sort of ask people to kind of tell me more about why you can't be that way. What happens for you? And oftentimes it comes down to a part of themselves that shows up that says, don't do that. It's going to be bad. Or and there's some kind of a you shaming message that people have. And so we tease it out. We ask them to kind of characterize it. Well, if this space we're in represents your life, where would that part be? Is it when you want to be confident and that part shows up and says, hell no, don't be confident because you're a loser. Is that in front of you energetically, or is it a whisper over here or over here? How do you know that's happening? Where do you feel it in your body? How do you know that it's not okay for me to go talk to my boss about a raise? Like, I have a knot in my stomach, right? So we sort of begin to characterize that. And then depending on whether it's a group process or a coaching session, we like to call what we split it out. And we help say, okay, well, you got this part, and then there's you. We kind of split it out, externalize it.
Yeah.
And so you've seen a process on a new warrior training adventure weekend where some of that can happen, like pick somebody to play the energy of that message.
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of set it up and we try to get the messages out, and then the person's reaction to those messages, like, yeah, when I hear that, I think, oh yeah, you're right. Right? So then we pick somebody to play that part, and we step them back. We like to say putting them in the magician perspective, to detach from it and to see it from a distance. And then we have ways, kind of check in like, oh yeah, you weren't born with that, right? That's probably shadow stuff that got put in the bag along the way.
Yeah.
So when do you first remember having that experience in your life where this part of you started saying you're a loser? And usually there's an age. Oh yeah, it was 5, it was 10, it was, okay, what was going on? Okay. So who are these people? Oh, that's you and that's your father. Okay, great. And then from there, we say, well, in light of what you said you wanted, which is to be confident, to speak up to your boss about a raise, what do you want to have happen here in this scene so that you can have that? And then we have more specific processes that we do that I won't get into because it would be like describing a movie to you. Like, you really have to experience it.
They're all unique.
And they're always unique,
right?
but we have specific scripted processes.
Oh, you do?
We do.
Okay.
And we follow what's there to make a determination. We may offer them a couple of choices. Well, you could do this or you could do that. And then we guide them through doing that. So that's more of the group facilitation.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working with somebody one-on-one, I just worked with a guy last Saturday, and we got the parts out in the 4 archetypes and had capes on the floor with different colors to represent those parts. And I moved him. I had him step into this part, and I interviewed that part.
That's very Gestalt, isn't it?
It is very
the man in the
Gestalt.
chair, right?
Yeah, and about the guy that showed up here today, who said, I wanted to have this or that. This guy wanted to have some excitement about life. And this part was encouraging him, and this part was hiding under a rock, and this part was critical, and this part was just trying to keep him safe. And so there's scripted questions that have been developed that really work, that help people to see what's happening from a different point of view. from a way that they've not been able to see it. It's taking that from shadow and putting it into the consciousness. In this space, this container, if you will, that has no real world consequences. In the case of a coaching session, there's nobody else there, so they can say or do what they want.
Right.
In the case of a group process, we do confidentiality up front.
Right.
And so they may be dealing with a message they got from their parents, but their parents aren't there, so it doesn't matter what they say or do, because they're working with what's going on inside of them. And ultimately, what we do is we help them find a way to get what they need and to bring that to themselves is probably the best way I can describe it.
Is this the guts work?
Well, so guts work is real warrior.
That's from, is that the carpet work where we...
But that's a real warrior function. Those are processes that are designed for a warrior, a new warrior training adventure weekend.
They sound similar to...
Yep. And Cliff Barry brought a lot of that to the Mankind Project.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
He did.
Because it's this psychodrama, right?
It's psychodrama. Exactly right. And so in shadow work, we don't do very many, gauntlet runs or where we have to put safety on someone. And there's not a lot of yelling in shadow work.
Okay. Yeah, there's yelling in gut work.
Right. But because guts work is it's more warrior. It's like get your warrior online and run through a wall.
That's right. Put up your shield. Yeah.
And get angry. And getting angry is sometimes appropriate. And on a new warrior training adventure, men learning to own and express their anger in a productive way is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? My experience has been with shadow work is that the more subtle, the more, like I said earlier, sublime or using a scalpel, ultimately is usually around some kind of grief and shame and working with that. And you don't see so much of that on a new warrior training adventure because it is a new warrior training adventure, right? And it's a short process. It's a 20-minute process. So shadow work is much more in depth. I worked with this guy the other day for 2.5 hours, and time flew as we were doing that. And on a group weekend, we might work with each participant for an hour to an hour and a half for their process. And there's usually two things that are happening in a shadow work process. Either I'm setting a boundary with some energy that's inside of me, or I'm creating connection with some part of me that I need to create connection with. It's cutting or connecting.
It's saying like, this voice isn't wanted here, or saying, how can we fold this voice in and change it?
Or bring blessing. Right? Because if I'm hearing you're a loser, you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you don't know what you're doing.
We just really want to turn down the volume of that. Yeah.
Well, we want to bring a part in that says, you're wonderful. This is part of my process that I went through recently at our gathering. Was this part over here was saying you're a loser, or you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're saying. And that's been in my ear since I was a kid. And I know where it came from, and I know who it was. And so the result, the solution, was to find the part somewhere that could tell me, that came from me, that you're wonderful the way you are. You're the opposite of broken. You're special. You're a big introvert. You're different than people in a lot of different ways. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And, things may not go the way that you want them to go every time you try something new, but you've got something in you to make it happen, and you've got something to bring to the world. I imagine as you're doing what you're doing, you have both of those sides coming up and could use that blessing piece that says, hey, Philip, you're doing a good job. But if it comes from me, all right, that guy said that about me. Probably not true. But when you're able to access that from a place of deep truth and bring that blessing to yourself, then that's where the shift occurs, because that's when you'll believe it.
You're with yourself all the time.
When that comes from you, or your higher power or
Yeah.
some source.
Right.
And I had to find the source for zest for life and curiosity. And I started by identifying other people who I saw that had it. Cliff Barry was in my process. And I said, well, you have it. I see it in you all the time. You just always have this, like, I'm going for the next thing. And I was invited to step into that energy and bring it over to this person who was playing the 5-year-old version of me, and to say it so that it was really from a place of truth. And then at the end, I got switched and I got to hear everything I said back to me. And that's when it grounded in. So ultimately what we do, and I know I've talked fragments about the process here, but hopefully you get a sense for, there's a structure to it. And, you made a comment earlier about me and creativity, I think.
Yeah. Artistry.
Artistry. And I said, I'm a technician.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there is an artistry, and the technician is knowing what tool to use.
Okay.
Right?
You've got a toolbox of
I got a toolbox over here, right? And the artistry is in, someone told me recently, what I really like about you, Craig, is you cut through the chafe. And so when I'm working with someone, I'm able to help cut through the stuff that's not relevant to get to what's really the truth and relevant. So I got that feedback, so I'll say maybe that's true. But the artistry is in being able to listen and understand and make sure I ask questions when it's not clear so that I can get clear. It's my ability to feed back to somebody what they're saying in a way that is their words. Because if you say something to me and I feed it back to you with my words, that's incongruent. And you're going to go, oh, wait a minute. I see that happen with not facilitators that are not very good at that. But when I say your words right back to you the way that you said them, two things happen. Number one is you go, yep, that's what I said. And then number two, you might say, now that I hear that back the way that I said it, it's not really that, it's this. And that sharpens the process. That sharpens the truth of it. And that's a part of my artistry, if I have artistry, is my ability that I've developed as well as I've developed it, to listen and feedback and hone in and cut out what's not necessary to get really sharp and focused, because then, and only then, I can say, okay, well, if that's true, if I got you right and you got yourself right, you're like, yep, that's what I'm dealing with. Then I can say, well, here's a choice and here's a choice out of my toolbox, the shadow work process, that you can then say, all right, well, that seems like what I want to try here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good. Every once in a while, I say something that makes sense. As someone said to me once, every now and then a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Well,
and
a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah. And that's my self-deprecating humor. But I will own that I've gotten enough feedback, without hopefully coming across as arrogant, that I have developed some skill. And some of that skill I developed as a software services consultant.
Yeah, I imagine.
Because I would get in front of groups of people and have to figure out, with all this information coming at me, how to whittle it down, how to cut out the chafe, to get to, well, we're going to design this model for you. I used to design multi-dimensional financial reporting models, hierarchical structures across multiple dimensions. It's great skill development for being a shadow work facilitator and coach. And organizational consultant.
For all of our younger listeners, separating the wheat from the chaff chafe is an old school saying, I think, from the wheat is the valuable part and the chafe or chaffer is...
Is it chafe?
I don't know.
Okay.
Chaff. I'm going to go with chaff.
Okay, great.
But separate the wheat from the chaff is you get the valuable part. The wheat is the value, is the most important thing. And this other thing has to be separated, almost like, to go along with artist thought, a sculpture the wheat is the sculpture of David. All of the rock that's on the ground is the chaff.
Yeah. And that was what happened when they harvested wheat, and they, created machines to do that ultimately, but was to cut away the stuff that wasn't the valuable wheat, so they had the wheat left. So,
and
thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, well, just some of these young kids might not know what that saying is, and I'm reminded of this saying, at least with Buddhism, I think is where I got exposed to it, is that enlightenment was a subtractive process. The things that you take away from yourself as opposed to things that you gain.
Yeah. And that makes sense practically if you think about like the movie Castaway, right? Where he's Tom Hanks, and plane crashes, he ends up on the island, and worldly possessions go away, and he was enlightened in that experience. Ultimately, he learned to survive by himself without anything, and then his perspective of the world, cut away all the what's the term they use? Whatever it is, all the stuff we have in life.
Yeah. I think my favorite enlightenment movie is Groundhog Day.
Oh, yeah. That's a great one.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
He lived the same day over and over again. He had to figure out how to keep trying different things, good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah. And at first to manipulate, yeah. But then he got bored with the manipulation. Yeah. Because he got what he wanted, but it wasn't really what he wanted.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
I love those movies. Yeah.